who's registered for this webinar, and for those who have joined us live now. It is great to see so many of you still coming out and joining us for these webinars. And also, just saying to Rowan now before this talk, we're noticing so many more people are watching on demand. So if you do have any topics that you'd like us to put on, do get in touch, because we do listen and we are putting together a plan for the next few months. For those watching live, you'll have the added benefit of being able to ask Svein and Rowan any questions at the end of this talk. For those of you who are watching on demand, if you do have any questions, do please get in touch with any on LinkedIn or via email with any questions or points you'd like covered, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to help you. So kind of without further ado, I'll hand over to Rowan and Svein, and I'll be back at the end to ask any questions. If you want to pop any questions in the right-hand side, just up on there, and I'll be back in 20 minutes or so and put any questions to you.
Thanks, Rob.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Also, to say, if you are watching this on demand, do please get in touch with questions through LinkedIn or through email, because we'd be happy to answer them. But we've also got a manifesto coming out soon, so that'll be going live tomorrow. So a lot of the topics and things we talk about today will be in that manifesto, so you'll be able to download that from LinkedIn. Okay, Sven's just sharing his screen. Here we go. Okay. Excellent.
Right.
Cool. Hopefully everyone can see that. We've got no way of knowing if you can or not, but we'll press on. So yeah, again, thank you very much to everyone for coming today or watching this at a later date. My name is Rowan Morrison, and I am Managing Director of Rationale.
I'm Svein Clouston, and I'm Strategy Director here at Rationale.
So we're here today to talk to you about ESG from a kind of number of different perspectives, really. And we've really aimed for this presentation to be, to use a horrible marketing term, actionable. We want people who watch this to kind of come away with a bit of a roadmap as to how, in a really busy space, you can go about differentiating yourself in ESG. But before we go on to talk about that, we thought for people who do not know who we are, we should just quickly talk about that. So Rationale is a brand purpose and content marketing agency. We have offices in Edinburgh, as you can probably tell by my accent, London and New York. And we support our clients, which vary from financial services organisations to third sector organisations, consultancies and more, to kind of find their reason for being, really, based on really deep insight into their audiences. Yes,
that's right. And we organise those services for our clients on three main service lines: define, articulate and amplify, which we'll go into a little bit more detail later on, and as to how they can help financial services marketers really differentiate their messaging, and certainly ESG messaging, which is why we're here today.
Yeah, and obviously ESG, we're a purpose agency, so a lot of what we do is around supporting our clients, again, from different sectors, to articulate to their audiences how they intend to or are already making a positive social impact. So that's kind of our point of view on ESG.
That's right. But first of all, we need to sort of understand the context and have a look at where we are with ESG at the moment. Now, the slide here, which I hope you can see, is titled ESG is Everywhere. A nice bit of alliteration there. But this was just done literally yesterday, just as an example of a different types of headlines that we're seeing across a broad spectrum of media. So not just financial services publications, which is interesting. It just shows that ESG as a topic is bleeding into the general public sort of consciousness.
And this was just from one day as well. So
we have everything here from your general ESG, who can you trust, to headlines around ESG markets just a bubble. It's the next Bitcoin. It's something which we don't really need to be thinking about. But that all this shows is that certainly ESG is in the public and private eye. And I think what this slide shows here is just, and I'm sure as we have a lot of sort of financial services marketeers on with us just now, this won't be news, but the tremendous amounts of capital that are sort of passing through, in industry funds at the moment is clear to see. Assets under management in ESG category have now surpassed $1 trillion. Earlier this year, net inflows were over $70 billion, and obviously that was inspired by not just the pandemic, but also the ensuing protests around racial injustice and also climate change as well. And just recently, this week actually, Barclays published a survey that suggested that the average portfolio allocation for ESG funds is set to double from 20% to nearly 35% over the next 5 years. So there's a lot of skepticism around ESG, certainly across the Atlantic in America, from certain parts of the political spectrum, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But what is clear is, there are huge amounts of money and attention being poured towards ESG and, related funds and activity as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say as well, and we'll talk about this now and later, that when we're talking about ESG, it is beyond, the ESG funds, it's beyond the ESG products.
Yes.
And I think what's important to flag even now, we'll talk about it later, is that this is part of a general massive shift. And again, there's skepticism around that, but a massive shift towards businesses of all kinds, but including financial services, which are at the kind of apex of many different influences, towards sustainability and practices, towards purpose-driven initiatives. So Absolutely. It's only one element of that, and shouldn't be in some ways viewed as separate to that overall
holistic piece. To Rowan's point there about businesses being pointed towards a more ESG style of business. This very truncated sort of timeline here shows where we've come from since 2016, when the UN produced their SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, following on last year by the Business Roundtable's exploration of what shareholder value, or sort of reevaluation rather, of what shareholder value meant. And then obviously earlier this year, we've seen the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing protests. This is all sort of seeing a sort of the focus on ESG as a holistic piece to this year, where across the globe we're seeing varying different ESG frameworks being delivered. In fact, the fact that there are none in the US, to the fact that it's quite strict in the EU, self-regulation at the moment. The Big Four have come up with a self-regulation framework for ESG, which is being sort of pillared by a lot of commentators for being sort of self-serving and what have you. But it's part of the conversation. And then of course later on this year we have the American election, which this presentation isn't focused on ESG from a US point of view, but we feel that's important to mention because that in many ways is a sort of ESG sliding doors. A lot has happened over the last 4 or 5 years to get us to this point. And we believe that should Trump be re-elected for a second term, that ESG, while the sort of passion and enthusiasm won't dissipate, governmental action will stall. Whereas if Joe Biden gets elected, we feel that sort of ESG rocket will be loaded up with fuel, if you like, and injected. Yeah. So, I think it is one or two ways that this could go. In November through to January.
More than just the US.
Exactly. It will influence governmental policy in the US, which will bleed into other aspects of general life, but also it will inspire and you'll see reactions from other governments about regulation around ESG as well. So it's a pivotal moment, which I think needs to be made clear.
Right. Okay, so this is just really summing up what we've just said. So why is it important to have a point of view in this complex environment? So it's threefold really. So consumer expectations are changing. okay, there are lots of different things that come into play with consumer decision making, but there's a lot of evidence now that everyone is aware of that consumers want the businesses that they interact with to demonstrate how they're making a positive social impact. That was something that happened before the pandemic and has been escalated by the pandemic. I mean, everyone's seen the media around, how businesses are treating their employees. So that is a thing that if you ignore it, you will be behind your competitors. And again, there's evidence that more purpose-driven businesses are outperforming their competitors. Obviously, for financial services organisations, which is what we're really particularly speaking to today, as I said earlier, they're at the kind of apex of a paradox. So they straddle the business world because they need to show their business customers that they understand the challenges that they have around ESG, so that they can talk to them about why this is important. They obviously have the investor audience, and then they have end consumers. So they have all of that coming at them. They need to show their understanding, but also show that they are also reflecting a more sustainable narrative in their own organisation, so that they're living what they're selling. So as the space gets increasingly competitive, I think it's fair to say that in terms of the product set, it's all much of a muchness in terms of what those ESG funds look like. The way to differentiate is around narrative. It's around the story that you can tell as an organisation, and everyone is clamouring to say something that does cut through, and there's already some really big players who really already own that space very well. So how do you go about doing that?
Yes, we have some good examples later on which we can show you, but yes, that storytelling piece is crucial. So you're obviously all thinking, well, how do I find, therefore, my ESG edge?
So we've made it sound quite stressful, haven't we?
Yes.
I'm realising it is quite stressful.
Indeed.
So hopefully we can soothe that now with some steps.
With some steps, absolutely. So what we've got here is a sort of quick summary of the route that we believe should be taken. Indeed, the route we have been taking with a lot of our clients, which is live a purpose which is authentic and builds trust. Now, we work, even though it is just 9 words, we've worked very hard on this because we didn't want to put create a purpose, because that suggests that you don't have one and you're starting afresh. But actually, living a purpose is, it's walking the walk as well as talking the talk. We're making sure that is authentic. You're putting actions behind it, and that invariably will build the trust with your audience and will lead to that sort of loop back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's important to say at this stage that ESG and having an ESG narrative is not really a marketing exercise. To truly live a purpose and one that is authentic and which does build trust. So those are our kind of 3 pillars that we use as a kind of North Star for how we go about supporting our clients to do this. It needs to draw in the business. So, and I think, again, marketing in the current environment is elevating in its influence within financial services organisations, and it does have a line into the business. It does have a line into governance. It does have a line into HR. And I think if you put out an ESG message which doesn't accurately reflect where your business is now or where it wants to go in future, then it won't be authentic, and it will have the opposite effect of what you want to achieve. Same with your product set. If you're just putting out an ESG product and not, that doesn't fit as your in your business strategy, then that's probably not going to do very well for you, because again, you won't be able to back that up. So it is about, ESG needs to be in the DNA of your business, from the board level to the people in the call centres who are speaking to your clients. And that's something, again, when we talk about our step-by-step approach, that needs to be front of mind. So it's not just, you're not just putting it out, you need to also put it in.
Consistency,
exactly.
So moving forward then to our methodology, the Rationale methodology, which I spoke about at the top of the webinar, was built on 3 sort of main service pillars. So we have define, which is, the sort of insight gathering section of the work. Then you have articulate, which can be best described as a strategy piece, and then amplify, which is creative. So that's how we work with clients to to go through that whole strategic journey and help them create that story. Not just create it, but unearth it, create it, and then obviously amplify it out as well. And this will go a long way to helping you create a differentiating message, because obviously you don't want to be saying the same thing as your competitors. Part of that define element is understanding what your competitors are doing and making sure that you're operating in a white space where no one else is.
Yeah, or doing it better than the people who are. So we'll just kind of take you through this step by step, and then we've got a couple of case studies of who's doing this well. So, and again, this is our methodology, so it's how we work with clients, and it's how we've seen results. And I think, again, really important to say, and we have it here, KPIs. I think, any initiative that you embark on like this, any marketing initiative, and your marketers, this, but particularly around, ESG, because it is kind of new for some organisations, this purpose piece, is you need to make sure it is measurable and that it is having an impact. And again, that helps you make a case for doing more purpose-driven initiatives as marketers or supporting the business. But it also, it ties into that business strategy and shows that you're living what you're saying. Yeah. So,
as a brand purpose agency, we see the cynicism around purpose almost on a daily basis. And one of the questions we get a lot is, or one of the statements we're confronted with a lot of the time from clients is, it's impossible to measure purpose. How do I measure purpose? And with Rowan's point about measurement, I think it's important that we sort of consider, it is very, very difficult to just, tie a sort of thread between your purpose, your sort of purpose activity and your bottom line. Okay, but what you've got to do, and I think ESG is a good example. Why are you putting out an ESG message? Okay, is it for internal employer reasons, or is an external facing message? And I think that small activity you can measure and then point it in turn to another measure, which in turn points it to your bottom line. So that's a very, very quick answer to you can't measure purpose. Well, you kind of right, you can't, but you can if you sort of think about breaking it down into smaller chunks.
Into different business impacts, which is how we've started to work towards measuring what we do. So so no, I've not done that slide yet. It's moving on too fast. Right. So just very quickly. So this is, I think, again, we were talking about how you kind of get the business involved in this, because it needs to be a deeper exercise than just marketing. So the way that we do this with clients is workshops. So ideally you draw in different stakeholders, and we use those workshops to kind of uncover what your unique point of view is. Also, examine what your competitors are doing, as Svein says, who your audiences really are and what they want to hear from you. And also that important piece is, what's your overall strategy as an organisation? How does ESG fit? What's your overall marketing plan? How does ESG fit? So that it's laddering up to a wider purpose rather than existing in a silo out on its own. And importantly, what are the proof points? So how are you already living that? Where are the gaps? And can you articulate a journey to achieving progress against those gaps that you can then talk to your audiences about and get them kind of bought into in terms of the promises that you're making that you'll deliver on? And you can sorry. Oh, I'm going. Yeah. Okay, so the articulate stage, as Svein said, is kind of the storytelling piece. So this is where you want to be mapping, what you want to say. So you've got all your insight that you've gathered from your defined stage. So you need to turn that into a purpose. And again, we've used the phrase North Star. So your ESG purpose should obviously fit into your overall purpose as an organisation and your other marketing activity. And you should write it down and make sure that it's really clearly communicated. We would then also kind of use that to outline associated narrative and messaging to really bring that to life, and again target that really specifically to your audiences. You might have to come up with a proposition at that stage for a particular campaign or set of campaigns. And really importantly, and something that we see missed over and over again, is what does this mean for your own team? Now, obviously, at the moment, always, but particularly at the moment, talent is at a premium. And I think the ESG piece, the generations that are coming into the talent marketplace for FS at the moment are looking to work for organisations that can articulate a purpose-driven, values-driven approach. So how are you articulating that internally and in your talent strategy? But also, how are your employees and the leadership of your organisation expressing this as well in their own personal thought leadership and the conversations that they're having with clients? And I think that should be part of any marketing strategy around ESG.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving through then to the third arm of this methodology, it's amplify. So again, this is all around the amplification of the sort of narrative, the strategy that you've created and the messaging. So the first point there is don't do content for content's sake. Nobody wants to be adding more content to the already busy email inbox, sort of websites, ecosystems that we all live in at the moment. So, don't just do it because you feel you have to. Obviously, the sort of golden rule about sort of content marketing certainly is audience first. So ensure that the sort of defining element of this methodology, you have interrogated that audience need, and in the amplification of your content, you are addressing those pain points with the proposition. Be dynamic and creative. This is easily said, but less easily done. But in financial services, certainly there seems to be sort of an accepted understanding that one can't be creative because one is simply passing on information and it's quite boring, it's quite jargon filled, transactional, exactly. So let's leave the creative stuff to the sort of more sort of consumer led campaigns. But absolutely that isn't the case. I think creativity is the one thing which can be used to turn the dial on effective messaging. And
again, it's sorry to interrupt you, Svein, but I think it's also to do with the storytelling piece as the next bullet. And I think we really believe that it's more than just the messaging and narrative, and creative approaches create that human to human connection. And even in when it's an investor audience, essentially you want something that resonates emotionally with them, and really great creatives are a way to do this. And even some of the great players in ESG are holding back a little bit on that, and it is a bit dry. So we would say, push the envelope on that a little
absolutely.
bit.
Just very, very wary of time. We'd like to leave some time for questions. So thought leadership, absolutely, still important across all parts of that funnel. Awareness, consideration, purchase, etc. But activate it thoughtfully. Don't just go publishing a 52-page white paper on LinkedIn. Think about how you can atomize it. Think how you can share it effectively across all channels. And also, don't forget sales and employee engagement collateral. Getting your team pointed in the right direction towards your North Star, and using again creative and dynamic collateral to sort of do that is a hugely effective and cost-effective way of making sure that everyone is pointed in the same direction.
I think arming your sales team with those narratives as well, because face-to-face is obviously really important, and again it can be overlooked as part of a campaign. It's maybe the most important channel.
Absolutely. Now we've got some examples here of best practice, best or good practice perhaps. We'll run through these quickly because we have finishing on sort of 5 key takeaways, and then we'd like to sort of give you the opportunity to ask some questions. But yes, we've got BlackRock here as an example from the US, and obviously they are a sort of gold standard leader in what they do around ESG. Their CEO Larry Fink has been very vocal in saying that this is where the organization is heading, and the fact that they've pledged to double the number of ESG ETFs over the next 2 years is very impressive. And again, their narrative is differentiated, and it's again one of the cornerstones of sort of content marketing is that your message doesn't have to be complicated to have an impact. Their messaging and narrative around ESG is very simple, it's very powerful. More importantly, and which is why we've included this here, it's very, very authentic. They go to great lengths to make sure that they are walking the walk. They publish, for example, lists of carbon intensive companies there that are making insufficient progress in their eyes, which, it's not a great way to make friends in the industry, but it's a way of them saying, listen, we stand by what we do and where we're going, and and we're calling some people out. Not just that, but they've also launched their sovereign bond ETF again, so they're weighting countries on their level of risk from climate change. So again, they're making proactive steps in standing behind their ESG message. And
they really own ESG, I think, in financial services. They definitely, they don't have to do much now to kind of amplify that, because they already did so much. And again, before the pandemic as well, they'd already got ahead of that.
Yeah. So just close to home here in the UK, we have Lloyds Banking Group. And again, they have made several commitments to tackling climate change and building for a greener future. But what's great about their approach is that they don't claim to have all the answers. They don't claim to be sort of know all about ESG and sort of sustainable developments, but what they're honest about is the fact that they do want to make the steps towards that. So and their creative is clear, simple, and very effective. And again, they have a great sort of use of case studies, which is a wonderful way of telling a story, obviously. And they do that by using their Clean Growth Finance Initiative to collect and collate and amplify their stories. So those are just two very, very quick examples. Happy for anyone to get in touch, and we can talk much longer.
Yeah, I know we're rattling through now.
We are rattling through.
So very quickly before questions, we're just kind of summing up what we've said. So in terms of a way into ESG, remember those North Star pillars, so purpose, authenticity, trust, and keep them in mind when you're developing the propositions, when you're developing campaigns. Don't be scared of storytelling. That's what brings anything to life in marketing, but even in ESG, what stories can you tell as an organisation that are yours and yours alone? Actions obviously speak louder than words, so use your influence to bring, the business behind what you're doing. So align whatever you're doing in marketing to what's happening in your business, and then get your stakeholders singing from the same hymn sheet. Make sure you find your proof points and USPs, and once you have them, really double down on them in your marketing messaging, and create an emotional connection, and whether that's through your creativity, through the stories, through the messaging, or in your face-to-face interactions for your sales team. So
yes, absolutely. And I think connected to that last point is try not to ensure or make sure that your messages aren't for sort of all of your audiences. I think it's hugely important that you focus on one segment of your audience and create an emotional connection with that with that segment, because that way you'll be able to engage with much more impact than you are with the sort of general message going out to everybody.
Yeah, do a few things and do them well is always a good lesson in marketing, I think.
Yeah, so we have rushed. I think
we're done.
That's a record for sort of half an hour, 16 slides. We'll stop sharing.
Our little timer's just gone off.
There we go. So yes, do please, if anyone has any questions, although I think there are
a few. On there, I think.
Yeah. Perfect. I got a question for Natasha's got the first question. Do you think implementing ESG values practices is different in other sectors? Do you think it differs across sectors?
Sorry, what was that again? All right, sorry, I can see it. Implementing ESG values and practices is different in others. So beyond financial services?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that template that we presented today, you can use it in any sector, and we use it in other ways, entirely just around how to kind of define and own any kind of purpose. So you can use that as a blueprint for your marketing, no matter what you're doing and what type of organisation. So yeah, any kind of values, purpose-driven exercise, that's a good kind of methodology to follow.
Yeah.
Excellent. Question from Jennifer here. Can you speak to how to approach brands that haven't been doing great in one or more ESG categories but genuinely planning to improve?
Do you want to do that one? That's a good question. Can I? So I think it's about what we were saying about being honest. So be authentic. I think a lot of financial services organisations obviously have had issues with, various things in trust, or, have work to do, in terms of addressing diversity, in terms of all sorts of things around purpose. And I think if you can show genuinely that you want to develop as an organisation and you have a roadmap to doing that, and you can articulate that in a really honest, direct way, I think people will come on that journey with you. And I think we have seen some organisations, do things like that. I mean, for instance, everyone always, talks about this, but the State Street example, when, what's it called? I always want to call her Ferocious Girl. She's not Ferocious Girl. The girl,
Fearless Girl.
Fearless Girl, yeah. Fearless Girl. Fearless Girl. They got so much flack for that because it turned out in reality that they had a bit of work to do around, pay disparity between men and women in their organisation. But actually, that campaign, they started to talk about how they meant, to change that, and I think that's really powerful. So I wouldn't, yeah. I
think as well, Jennifer. I think. Much in the same way that BlackRock are calling companies out who aren't, living up to the standard that they expect. I think to your question about how do you approach brands that haven't been doing great, I think show them good examples of what other brands are doing and show the results that these brands are having through the creation of, insight-led, targeted, creative campaigning.
Yeah, you mean to get the internal team on board with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we think about this a lot as an agency because we're obviously a purpose agency, and we get organisations coming to ask us for help sometimes that maybe aren't perfect or maybe have some skeletons in the closet from the past, and we've asked ourselves a lot, who do we want to work with, and will we support organisations that genuinely want to change, even though maybe in the past their actions haven't been ideal, and we've said yes. I think that's kind of our North Star, is that if organisations come to us and they want to make a positive impact, even if they haven't in the past, then we'll support them with the future. So
do you know what? To be honest, that's what I was just about to ask you. Actually, what were your views on if somebody came to you and you knew it was a kind of like a publicity exercise where they still were going to commit to making these changes, but you knew that not they were false promises, because of course they would still carry out on that particular area. But what would be your thoughts on if people did? Do you think it's a good thing because they're kind of doing it at least to start, or do you think that's bad?
It's so complex, isn't it?
In fact, we move away from ESG in particular, Rob. But we are a brand purpose agency, and Rowan and I have had a lot of discussions with the team as well about exactly that quandary. Do we help those type of organisations? And I think. The answer is yes, if we can get some sort of a commitment that that they are going to sort of do something. But I think you're right. I think doing something is better than nothing. But I think it's we've spoken about not just coming in and sort of helping organisations like the one you described do the work, but actually showing them, being proactive about what it could actually lead to if they did more. If they didn't just stop at the initial engagement. And
if you make a start and they see the business impact of that, then chances are they're going to do more of that good thing. Recently, again, it's slightly off topic, it's not ESG, but Oatly, which is a very purpose-driven business, which recently took investment from, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the
Blackstone.
Yeah. They got a lot of flack for that because Blackstone, have been
accused of
the Amazon and stuff, the rainforest and that,
And I thought Oatly's response to that was spot on. They were like, that money's going to go somewhere. And if we take that, we can do good with that money, and hopefully that will show Blackstone that their investment is going to pay off, and they'll invest in more purpose-driven businesses in the future, not the past. Now, there's other elements to that, and not 100% agree with it, but I think that we're kind of about a positive future rather than punishing people from what they've maybe done in the past. And there are organisations that I think we wouldn't work with. But, it's nuanced. I think if you can make a commitment to doing good in the future, and organisations are seeing that, and I think some of them cynically, and it's about profit. Some of them it is about making an impact, but, business is business. And, if they're doing good things and we can support that, then we do.
Yeah. I think as well, you agree. I think if you speak to some people have that negative view of these big conglomerates giving money to charity, for instance. It's only a little act they're doing. But if you speak to the charities that are actually doing really good work with that money, I suppose they might argue, well,
yeah, exactly. It's better than nothing, isn't it? It's just so easy to be cynical. You know, I hate cynicism. So it's so easy to be cynical.
And to be honest, I've made quite a few changes. I started buying Oatly quite often. Someone messaged me when the Blackstone investment, and they messaged me and asked me if I would not drink it anymore. And that's where we had that discussion around. And to be honest, but you think if I was to do that against Oatly, I'd probably have to stop buying everything I buy from all the companies that invest and share. I think you've got to be able to pick your battles quite wisely. We've got one question actually from Elaine. If you don't mind finishing on a question, is there any ESG leaderboard? Do you guys think there will be a meaningful highest ESG ratings race amongst investors?
Good question. Again, from a sort of governmental regulation point of view, highest ESG rating. Okay.
So the ones that are best performing against ESG. Okay. I don't know actually if there is. I would imagine there probably is some kind of leaderboard or some kind of benchmark. And yes, I do think that there will be some kind of race against that. I mean, there are. You know, I think it's kind of easy to say it's a bit zeitgeisty at the moment, but I think we've founded a brand purpose agency. We don't think it is zeitgeisty. It's here to stay, and I think organisations. I think there has genuinely been a meaningful shift since the pandemic. I think the world has changed and will continue to change, and I think the way that business is done is fundamentally shifted. So yes, I think that will be what companies are measured by in future. If you look at the kind of modern businesses coming up, the startups, they're all already all over this, and it will soon just be the norm. You know, that will just be the norm.
I think as well, not that I'm an experienced investor at all, but I think when you're looking at companies, you know, people like Brewdog now who are doing so much in terms of their environmental impact and their social impact. I think if you're an investor, you're far likely to maybe invest in them who probably are looking for the future rather than some of the older companies, which they haven't made that change yet. So they might have loads of potential flaws in their path to get to that level. Whereas a lot of these new companies, you mentioned, Rowan, are kind of already doing that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just part of how they're doing it. It's not like, oh, this is a special initiative. It's how they're run as businesses. It's how we're running our business. You know, it's not, a weird thing. It's just that's how we run. So I think that
absolutely. I mean, it does seem a quite macro point to end on, but I think the US election in November is a huge, as I said, it's a huge sliding doors moment for ESG, because another 4 years of Donald Trump could lead to, not the door being slammed on ESG, but certainly the brakes being pulled quite efficiently on this sort of on the movement. But should Biden be elected, the support, the enthusiasm, I think the sort of congressional and perhaps House support for the regulation as well will be huge. And Elaine, I think to your point there, I think we could see in the next 6 months almost, that taking off. So I think that's hugely important. And I think over the next month or so, we'll see a huge shift again in ESG
but I mean, even if
messaging
Trump gets in, I think everything's polarizing at the moment, isn't it? So it's like, you'd like to think the more something swings the other way, then the more there's a counter effect.
Yeah, but it might not for another 4 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
the speed of it. Yeah.
So I think it's hugely important the election in the US and the ripple effects it will have on the European some institutions, markets, and marketeers as well is huge. Yeah.
Definitely. So I've got a poignant point to end on about looking ahead to the next month and 6 months. Maybe we should run this again in a few months and found your ESG edge, maybe. Rowan, Svein, really appreciate the time today, and thank you for all of you who've joined us. Again, for those of you who are watching this on replay, of course, you won't be able to ask any live questions because we'll not be here. But if you connect with the guys on LinkedIn or drop them an email, and as always, if you're struggling to connect with them at all or can't find them, do get in touch with me and I'll be able to link you up. So then that's it from me, really. A massive thank you to everyone who's joined and for you two as well, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Lovely.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.